Okay, so thank you again for coming. I'm really excited for today's panel. I want to first, introduce myself and my colleague Andrea, but then share a little bit about the background of this. So I'm Hope. I am the life design educator for student leadership and involvement. So this is a pretty new, recent role that the Life Design Lab created. I started in January of this year. And so, I had a great first semester, but was really thinking about how can we kind of make more robust opportunities for leaders on campus to share with each other and to really leverage our experiences. And I know one of the major things that we've seen kind of in the career realm is that, having leadership experience really does give you a leg up, especially as you tell your story in interviews or as you, demonstrate your skills in the workplace. And so we wanted to hear from some past and current leaders about their journey at Hopkins and how that's translated into their life post-graduation, whether that's in their career or personally in other things they're involved in. And so that's really the impetus for this panel. I'll pass it over to Andrea so she can introduce herself too.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Wiseman. I am a life design educator. I more specifically work with first-year students in the Whiting School of Engineering. And as Hope said, everyone's told you should do leadership experiences, you should have service, all of these things. So you kind of should do it, but it's not really explained like how that's going to be helpful potentially later on, and it needs to be, or hopefully is more than just something to put on your resume. So that's kind of why we wanted to have some alumni back as well. Hope one had to drop out, one of mine, and the other I saw for a second and disappeared. So maybe she will come back. So
I hope she does.
So we can kick it off if we want. Do you want me to start off? Why don't you have them introduce themselves?
Sure.
First?
So our panelists today that we have currently are Anna, Liam, and Sofia. I wanted to try to, bring together a mix of people. So I'll let them introduce themselves more formally, but I'd love to hear from our panelists kind of your name, obviously who you are, whatever that kind of means to you, and then what you're currently doing and what kind of leadership positions you held at Hopkins. So just kind of a small holistic picture of your leadership experiences and what you're doing now. So let's start with Anna.
Oh, I was hoping we'd start with Liam, but hi everyone, I'm Anna. I graduated in 2018 and currently quarantining from home in Michigan, but I'm usually in New York City. And while I was on campus, I was involved in couple of different student activities, but I guess one of the most prominent ones that comes to mind is student government.
Thank you. And what are you currently doing in New York?
Yes, I am working as a life sciences healthcare consultant.
Awesome. Great. And now we will pass it to Liam.
So my name's Liam Haviv. I graduated from Hopkins. I finished my BA in 17 and my MA in 18 in philosophy. And then I did a fellowship right afterwards. And now I'm actually back at Hopkins. I'm working as a researcher in the Office of the President. And then leadership experiences at Hopkins. I founded the Alexander Hamilton Society, and the Ideal JHU, which is a chapter of a national organization I run, Ideal, and then I was on SGA. So.
Thank you for being here. And then I'll go ahead and pass it to Sofia.
Hi, I'm Sofia. I graduated just this past May. I'm currently in Miami. I am a program manager at a local nonprofit, a public health related nonprofit. And while I was on campus, a lot of my leadership experience looked like doing service within the Baltimore community. So I was involved with the Center for Social Concern. I was involved leadership in Thread, and I was also a teaching assistant for a social entrepreneurship course.
And it looks like Dominique just signed on as well. We're just going around, Dominique, and there's 3 other past student leaders, and just kind of introducing yourself quickly, major year, and any major involvement, and then we'll kind of start the panel and just kind of popcorn some questions around to you all.
Okay, introduce myself. So I don't know how to use Zoom. I saw your email. I got logged myself out. I am Dominique. I graduated in 2012. I did public health studies and Africana studies. And used major involvement outside of being an RA. I was a chem lab TA. I was a really big part of my Hopkins Christian Fellowship. I don't know, I did a lot of other things. I think I did things with the Center for Social Concern. I did an internship there and some things with Baltimore Scholars Program. We did a lot of activities. I think I'm missing something because I'm getting old, but that's about that.
And Dominique, what are you doing currently?
I'm an ER nurse and a public health nurse. I'm actually getting a new job. I'll be working with children full-time in the ER. Excited. Yes.
Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
All right, Andrea, do you want to kick us off with some questions?
Yeah, sure. So talking about skills, so with us in the Life Design Lab, we're really focused on really trying to make that transition between not just I did this, but I did this activity and this is what I learned. So thinking about all of your leadership activities inside, outside of the classroom, what skills do you feel that you use on a regular basis that you gained from some type of leadership or outside of the classroom experiences? And whoever wants to answer can kind of just unmute and jump in.
I can answer. So with all of my internships, I think the biggest thing that I worked last night and my voice is giving out on me. I think the biggest thing is, not to be cliche, but people skills. My first internship, I had to work at a drug rehabilitation house with people very different from myself. And it was so valuable because I had to learn how to relate to people, had to learn how to speak to people, pick up on different parts of culture. Definitely would not have gotten that just going through a lecture in mud or something like that. I had to get out there and really put myself out there, be a little bit uncomfortable, which I know is hard sometimes because it's unpredictable. Ask for help from, I guess, people who were more familiar with the culture, like my supervisor at the time. She would say, you know, these women come from this background. What you've experienced is different from what they may have experienced. I suggest perhaps talking in this way or bringing up this topic or avoiding this topic and just being yourself and being authentic. That was really valuable. I had another internship in Detroit, same thing. And it opens doors because people say, oh, she can talk to people. She has a lot of potential. At the time, I didn't have a lot of marketable skills outside of being a student. But if people can just see that you are trainable and willing and open to do things, the skills parts will come. They'll train you there in the future.
Yeah, just adding on to what Dominique was saying, I think my experience was quite similar. It was definitely the people skills and the relationship building skills that I think I've really been able to apply in what I'm doing now. And it's, again, a skill that's transferable to almost any field that you choose to go into. And it's I think mostly it's definitely the confidence that you bring in being able to talk to people of different scales, different levels. And again, that's something, my internships were very much things that were in the community. So I did, it gave me the opportunity to not only get to know the cultures, but also learn how to best communicate with them. And also just push me outside of my comfort zone. I think sometimes as students, it's very easy to feel like, oh, I'm just a student. I don't really have the skills or the necessary, like the abilities to speak to people that are managers or of higher level positions. But my internships like kind of taught me that, you know, at the end of the day, we all have something to bring to the table. We all have good ideas. And it really helped me build that confidence in myself that, you know, now I get to use in my job on a daily basis. I just graduated in May and I'm like being put in a table with people that have way more experience than I do. But I think it was definitely some of the experiences that I had at Hopkins and the conversations that I was put into at Hopkins and the tables that I was put into at Hopkins that really gave me the confidence to be able to speak out when in those places where there might be other people that have more power than I do.
Yeah, I think people skills is a big part of it, and then also critical thinking as well. So it's not just about like going out past graduation and looking at issues around you, but really thinking about what are some of the key priorities, or being able to add another layer of thinking about the issues that you're facing, whether it's in your job or just daily life. And so being able to critically think about those, identify those, and then be able to proactively provide some recommendations, I've found very applicable in my post-grad life.
I think as a student, we sometimes like our schedule feels like it's ours. We have classes, and the classes, those are the set hours we work in, and then we have our study time. And I think when you take leadership roles in different organizations, you learn the time management part, which is important. But there's also the realization that your schedule for whatever amount of time that is really not yours. You're responsible to a group of other people working on something that you all believe in. And that can be really powerful, whether it's SGA or you're in an organization. And you realize when you get to when you have a job, that your schedule is really not yours at all. And kind of understanding what that process looks like and developing that process. Developing how you respond to certain things in certain situations. I think it's generally part of a maturation process, but it also helps when you're trying to build that. You're building the relationships, you're building an understanding of what you're doing in this kind of larger picture of your task. And so, yeah, that's what I would add.
Are there any kind of surprising things that you've experienced in whether your job or your personal life that you were like, oh, wow, I remember back to this specific moment as a leader. I didn't necessarily know that this would be so helpful, but it is right now. Is there anything that was really surprising to you all?
I can maybe start this one off. Nothing ever goes as planned, ever. And I think that was kind of a big thing when you're working with an organization that puts on events, or honestly, anytime when you're working with people, you can plan and plan and plan and do everything in your power to make sure something's perfect. And there will be people telling you like it's not going to be perfect. We just have to roll with it. And you may say, no, it can be, and you're wrong. You're always going to be wrong because things happen. And I think adaptability, and I think that what the other panelists have mentioned, Dominique's focus on personal interactions, and Anna's mention of critical thinking, and Sofia's mention of being able to share that confidence. Those things help you when things don't go right. And I think if anything, I've been surprised at how often things don't go right, but prepared because of the 4 years I spent, doing leadership stuff at Hopkins.
Yeah, and again, I think Hopkins definitely prepares you, and I think it's just sort of the Hopkins culture to be extremely quick thinkers, to be able to handle a large workload, and to be able to just like think on your feet and be adaptable. I think that's just a part of the nature of how Hopkins is structured and what we are kind of being without even like thinking about it being trained to be. So that's definitely I think I was a little bit naive when I first started working, and I thought like, oh, this is something that once I leave Hopkins, like I'll be able to take away, like I won't have to necessarily do these like last minute things or like do last minute planning once I start a job. I kind of like, I think I compartmentalized that in my brain. I was like, oh, this is something that happens in school. But kind of being on the field now, I definitely appreciate the pressure that Hopkins put on, because I do think it prepared me to be that adaptable employee, and being able to kind of do things on the spot, or a lot of times it's not even has to be something negative as something going wrong, but there's just opportunities that are presented last minute that are good for your organization that you just you need to pursue in like a quick turnaround. Those skills that of being adaptable, and that I was definitely surprised that to the extent of which they would be needed. I mean, I know being adaptable and being a flexible employee is, something that is always called for, but I think the extent to which that is needed, it was definitely a surprise to me.
Yeah, I just want to also re-emphasize the point about like how Hopkins prepares you as well, just because I think that in and of itself gives you the opportunity or confidence, like some of the other panelists mentioned, to be able to succeed in your job. And I was thinking more of this question specifically in the classroom context. Now I know we've been talking about like extracurriculars and leadership and how that also helps us. But for me, like some of the classes and the content that I was learning actually has been super helpful in my job as a healthcare consultant. For example, I took a couple of classes about like statistics and research being done in certain life sciences areas, and that sort of surprised me as being super helpful as I transitioned to my current job.
I can also add being 8 years out of graduation, and I think my perspective is such that there's always a seed planted that you don't see until it's watered, sometimes under pressure, sometimes just with time. So being a nurse, I have to learn delegation. I have to learn how to train people, tell people kind of what to do in a really nice way, but get it done, and be responsible for people in a very intimate ways, because you're nursing, you have someone's life in your hands. So I would say, I think being at Hopkins, you're a student, you're still the one, you're doing leadership things, I guess, with your peers, but then you also are so new when you graduate, you're still kind of green. And I think that being at Hopkins and doing those leadership things, although I maybe at the time didn't know how to train people, I didn't at the time know what it meant to delegate. I will say I've had a lot of jobs in the past 8 years, and I was completely surprised, like Sofia was saying, I was so surprised at how well I could handle certain things, because Hopkins kind of forced you to deal with a lot of things, sometimes for better or worse. While my other coworkers may have been struggling with something, I'm like, this is easy, this is great. I can do X, Y, and Z and do it well because of the training that I did get. And now I know how to train other people well because that leadership was put in me, although I may have not used it all the time back when I was younger. So y'all are in a good place.
Great, thanks. So kind of shifting to connections, because that's something else that we are continuing to try to push. Yes, networking, but more so connections, like continued connections. So thinking back through your JHU experiences, what connections have helped you in terms of either listening and hearing their stories, them making any personal connections for you, or them just informing you about their field and their industry? Have you kept in touch with other people, and kind of what has been helpful?
Yeah, I think mentorship definitely played a big role in me deciding kind of what field I wanted to explore coming out of graduating from Hopkins. And it was definitely building that relationship with whoever my supervisor was or whoever I was reporting to, and being able to pick their brain and ask them, like, how did you get here? What does it look like to actually have your job? That kind of, without having to myself be in that position, it still opened that door for me to get a better idea of what that field looked like. I think in my family, no one in my family is in the healthcare field. No one in my family is in public health or works in nonprofit. So definitely, tapping into those connections helped me learn more about the field that I thought I was passionate about. So I definitely tapping into people that are placed in your life that have some level of experience that you can build those connections with, and they could then give you advice. They can then help you guide you into what, just be frank with you with what the benefits and cons and what the pros and cons are of whatever it is. I think that's really valuable because it helps you then consider like the genuine like it helps you take away a little bit of the stardust of something, and helps you like genuinely see, oh, this is what that person is experiencing, like extreme stress from this position, or like this is the skills that I might need and if I want to go into this field.
Yeah, when I think back to my involvement with student government, that gave me the opportunity to meet a lot of different people like within the Hopkins community, whether that was from like administrators or trustees to different professors and alums as well. And I think for me, what may have started out as like a relationship built on working on student life issues that were sort of derived from my role as a member of student government turned into long-term current relationships that I still maintain. And, you know, through those kinds of conversations, they've evolved from like being super campus focused or student life focused to more about my role, my path, and their careers as well.
Dominique, did you want to go?
Sure. I'm sorry. I don't know. Like I'm a grandma. I'm trying to do this Zoom thing. Okay. Yes. So I will say the connections. I think it's just so important for students and grads to be proactive and reach out and keep in touch. I still have coffee dates with my high school teacher. I think there's just value in that. A lot of people just graduate and they're just like, okay, I'm done with Hopkins, bye. But I always try to email certain professors or advisors or anything like that. When I was at Hopkins specifically, connections definitely helped with the internships. And then when I was in the internships, I think one actually offered a job because I kept in touch with her. The other one, I always used her as references. So connections can also not just necessarily be in terms of getting a job at the moment or anything like that, but can you be a reference for me here? And those open up doors for scholarships in graduate school and things like that. I think when I did public health, I had a hard time initially because I didn't have certain, I think the program was different back then. I didn't have certain skills, and I was nervous if I would be marketable or not. But just meeting my internship people, and they just opened doors for me. I like the way you work. We'll train you on the job. So I guess I would just encourage you all as you are moving on and whatnot, just keep in touch. Send an email here, send a phone call here. I have LinkedIn that I used to still keep in touch with my public health advisor, who I met over 10 years ago. I'm getting old. Yeah.
So Hope actually sent us, some of these questions in advance, and I wrote out, in my little notepad, my crusade on networking. And so I was really happy to see that there was an emphasis on connections, because I think, and I don't think this necessarily holds across the board, but there is sometimes a feeling that networking is transactional. It's that I'm going to meet this person and use them to get to where I need to be. And I think that represents a fundamental misunderstanding of one, how we build these connections, but also of who these people are. Our professors, they have kids, they have wives, they have, or spouses, they have, lives, and they've dedicated their entire lives to researching this topic that we're interested in. And I think it's worth, when you think about, and this is strictly academic now, but when you're thinking about those connections, you're thinking about meeting other people, really. And I don't know that I ever approached going to office hours or speaking with a mentor with the explicit intent that I would get something out of it, except that, it was an opportunity to pick somebody's brain who did something that I loved and maybe had a passion for. And so so I guess I'll say that as related to connections. And I guess in that vein, Ideal, which was the club, the Hopkins chapter that I was running, my senior year, we started developing a program with the intent of getting funding for an after-school program in Baltimore City. And I think we spent maybe 2 full years researching, which included trips to University of Chicago, to Harvard, and we just met with professor after professor and student after student, seeing how they built programs from a university that worked with students in the neighboring community, as a bridge from students from the institution. And we learned a tremendous amount. I've stayed in touch with all of them. We ended up getting funding from the Idea Lab, which was a program run out of the president's office. And I had continued conversations with people in the president's office, and they helped me, when I was going through tough times, and they ended up having a position open for a researcher. And so that's how I ended up here. And so I guess I would just emphasize again the importance of the people you're interacting with, and thinking about them, as people. And I think things work out when you follow what you're trying to do. So.
Yeah, I really love that advice of just, cultivate a true relationship, and kind of the follow-up, like Dominique was saying, of like, this is something to be nurtured over time, and that the ultimate outcome isn't necessarily always a specific job opportunity, but that there are other benefits like mentoring, like friendship, right? And so I think I really appreciate all of that. I want to ask one more question, and then I do want to turn it over to our participants. So if you do have a question, you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask it, or if you want to put it in the chat, we're happy to collect it and ask it on your behalf. So just wanted to throw that out there so you can get your creative juices flowing. So I think one of the other things that we're really focusing on, especially in my partnership with the Student Leadership and Involvement Office, is thinking about how we actually tell the story of our leadership involvement. And I think Hopkins students do a really great job of getting involved. Like, there is no shortage of things to be involved in, and I think we do a good job of finding our spaces on campus. I'm interested though to hear how you actually told that story. So whether it was in an interview, or whether, you tell stories of your time, to friends or in personal spaces. What do you emphasize when you tell that story, and how has that played out for you in your own experiences?
I can maybe start this one off, I guess. Well, there's like this awkward silence, where you have to unmute yourself, and so you never know. But I guess so. I think part of it is being very clear in where you're interviewing. So you don't want to try to sell a minivan to somebody who wants to buy a Ferrari. You need to be clear at like what the person who's interviewing you is interested in, and what aspects of you can draw out to show that. So I guess my starting point would always be to start with something that I'm really proud of. You're proud of something, you can talk about it passionately. And then you tailor that story, but it's also about, creating a kind of full picture. So even here in a few minutes, I've spoken about Ideal. It's something I'm proud of. And I've spent 8 years building it, and, all of this stuff, but Ideal is also just a small part of who I am and who I'm trying to explain. So, if I'm going into an academic interview, or, I'm applying to grad schools, maybe I'm emphasizing, my academic background. In my interview with the president's office, it was much about explaining how Ideal was a part of my life, as how much my, master's in philosophy has contributed to my writing skills, and how working with this organization has shaped my understanding, and how working with SGA has helped me think about relationships with people and higher education. And so it's about identifying, as far as I can tell, not that, I'm some guru, I'm 25 years old, but like what has been helpful for me has been identifying the things that I'm really proud of and connecting those in some sort of tangible way, and then tailoring that to the position I'm at. Makes how what I am is an expression of what I want to do with the people I'm interviewing.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Liam was just talking about. And for me, I keep going back to student government, but like the way that I thought about it relative to consulting interviews is that, the consultant position often involves a lot of identifying problems and then presenting solutions. So that kind of angle I was able to translate over based on my student government experience by saying, here are some of the student life issues that I identified and how myself and as part of a team worked to overcome it. So just echoing what Liam said in terms of tailoring your story to be most relevant to the position, responsibilities that you expect, and the type of environment that you'd like to be in.
Yeah, I'm definitely still no expert in kind of connecting some of these things, but I think connecting the dots between all of your experiences is a very important point. And Hope knows that I've been sitting down on couches with her having these conversations just a couple months ago, but definitely connecting the dots between your experiences. And I think what I learned through the interview process is that what's important to an employer is not just knowing what you did, but also like what skills did you gain from that. So like Liam was saying, like, oh, I was an SGA, so that gave me better understanding of people. So really like connecting the dots on, I did this, so I have this skill now. I think that's really important to employers, of being able to know yourself, like what I'm good at, like what can I provide. It's not just about what you've done in the past, but really connecting the dots not just within your own experiences, but also with how those past experiences will transfer into tangible skills that you can apply to whatever position you're applying for. And I think this is something that definitely took me some time and like practice to actually like delve and kind of and pull out for myself. For me, it's kind of hard for me to go into an interview because a lot of the times, I mean, I'm not someone that likes to like brag about what I've done. So really kind of just even identifying those things was very difficult to me, because if I don't know, it's just not like in my nature to talk about what I do. So definitely practicing and just like Liam said, stemming from what you're proud of will just naturally kind of bring those things out without you having to without it being extremely difficult for you to talk about them yourselves.
Okay, yeah, I don't have too much more to add. In terms of connections from experiences, I think for those people who are really community-based or public health-based, I think the most valuable thing from connections from internships or even just experiences on campus with certain individuals give me just a good idea of who my community was that I wanted to serve. So when I graduated, I did not have a job, and for a Hopkins person, that is torturous. But the good thing was that through people that I met there, through experiences, like I said, talking with my old advisor at the time, getting advice from older students who kind of did what I wanted to do or were in that community field, just hearing them and the opportunities that they were able to kind of cultivate was helpful, because like I said, I didn't have a job. I didn't really know what was out there. And my first job out of college was actually something I never thought I would do ever. I did social work. I visited kids on probation, and it was a lot. But that job led me to a deeper understanding of who my community was, and it led me to an understanding of what the needs were. And then it showed me different ways that I could get involved, because I met different professionals from all walks of life. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a caseworker, and this case manager here, or nurses who did field work. So I would just say that getting to know people's stories and getting to know my community led to getting to know the needs of the community, led to getting to know what I could do to kind of help out and have those relationships with individuals and different organizations. And it's definitely served me well and got me into nursing, and I'm very happy. So just try something new. You never know. Never know what it could lead to.
Thank you all. I do want to pause here and open up for questions for participants. So you can either unmute yourself and feel free to go ahead and ask the question, or if you'd like to put it in the chat, we're happy to facilitate that question. So we'll endure some awkward silence while we wait.
All right. For the sake of killing the awkward silence.
Thank you.
No problem. I guess one question I have for everyone, but specifically for the SGA people because I'm on it, but also for everyone, like how do you talk about these experiences like on your resume, for example? Because obviously it isn't just something to put on your resume, but it is something that goes on your resume. So I'm curious how exactly you portray that.
Yeah, I think going back to my earlier point about tailoring your SGA experiences to the type of job you might be interviewing for. So one example from my side is like consulting is all about like problem solving. So I would think critically about what are some of the key initiatives that I was able to get done while on SGA, and walk through in a brief and succinct manner the whole process of just identifying the issues and then how you kind of overcome that. But being very strategic about that, because I mean, if, as you probably know, there's so many different facets of your work on SGA. So just thinking a bit critically about, like, again, what Liam was saying, like what you were most proud of, and then the types of examples that will really showcase the skills that your employer may be looking for.
So I guess there are a couple points here. I think Sofia made a really important point about like not always knowing how to talk about yourself without sounding like you're bragging. And I think a lot of this generally is kind of about confidence. But it's also like, how do I put this? It doesn't just like come necessarily for everybody, and it's a difficult process of self and reflection and thinking about like when you're going into a job interview, it's a lot of work trying to figure out who it is that you want to be, and that isn't easy for everybody. And it's like, I think like often an important reminder that like, and that's for me why I start out with things I'm passionate about or proud of, because I can talk about that and understand who I am and then explain it to someone. And I think with SGA, it's a really important case of like, when you're on SGA, you're in a position of power. And I think, and I found in SGA with people who really want to help you, the administration of the university, all of that, get things for students. And it's incredible how those relationships kind of develop when you're working with those people as a partner in this kind of broader task. And I think in speaking about SGA, a lot of it's about humility. Like, you're a student who has a position at the top of the student body, but largely like you're still not the administration. And so a lot of it is thinking about how you work with administration, how you work with people in power, how you made clear that like you respected those institutions and you wanted to be a part of this process together with them. And when I talk about SGA and job interviews, a lot of it is about that kind of sense of humility and understanding, and that interaction with working people who are older, who have different power in these situations, and how that can translate.
Was that helpful, Sam?
Yeah, I guess I should start being a little nicer to them. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, that was helpful. Thanks.
We also had another question come in the chat. So Ashiat just wanted to understand a little bit more about how you tackled your first job environments and what skills helped you adapt to those environments the most. So maybe it's helpful to tell us a story to kind of help us dive in and what that was like. But we're excited to hear more.
Okay, I guess I can give a little something here. So I did public health and Africana studies. My first job, I think I mentioned, was like a social work type fellowship through AmeriCorps. I was 60 hours a week. I would be in the office from 8 to 5 and then visiting children from 5 to 11 who were on probation, making sure that they were in the house, they had curfews. Some days when I wasn't in the office, I would be literally driving on the street looking for kids. You're not in school, get in the car now. Taking them to courts, dealing with police stuff, taking them to community service, and then just doing activities with them to kind of keep them as much as out of trouble as possible. It was very intensive care for these at-risk children in these environments. So that is not what I anticipated doing, having gone to Johns Hopkins University. I wasn't thrilled with it at first. So I think a lot of crazy things happen. I won't even get into all of that. But I will say the first thing I would say is humility in terms of tackling your first job environment, because like I said, I had to humble myself. I did not think I went to this expensive school to go be an AmeriCorps person. I had to humble myself and realize that sometimes things are for the experience of learning and enjoying, which I know we all are so great at, not. As Hopkins people, we're always looking towards the next goal and how we can get to the next place. And I would just encourage all of you to enjoy life, just to enjoy life and to learn, because you're young and you're going to have plenty of time to try new things. So at the time, I think I saw it as a setback. This is not what I wanted to do. I actually had gotten into Columbia to get my master's and I didn't feel like paying for it. So I gave it up and I was lost until I found this job. So be humble for one, and being humble means not being like abused, but understanding what you can glean from a certain place, and also getting to know your coworkers and people in places of leadership who can really help you and be in that mentorship role. I know some jobs assign you a trainer or a mentor, and sometimes you just have to kind of befriend or find, someone, I think I can trust this person. Maybe they can kind of help me out, show me the ropes. Don't burn your bridges. Be someone who is as forthcoming and as outgoing as possible. And I don't necessarily mean like personality wise. I know we're introverts a lot, but I just mean you're open and people see you as teachable. Those definitely helped you with that. So by the end of my fellowship, it opened doors to another job, which led me to be a nurse. I would have never seen that happening. So just like I said, be humble and ask questions. And yeah, just enjoy yourself. It's okay. You don't have to be that heavy all the time. I know how it is as a Hopkins student. We all end up in the same place. 8 years out, we're doing our thing. So don't put so much pressure on yourselves also in terms of skills adaptations. Just enjoy.
Yeah, I like what Dominique said a lot. I think this also, it's highly dependent on the type of job that you end up getting post-college. Giving you an idea of kind of like where I'm at right now. So I work for a local community-based nonprofit. I am a program manager, which means I have about 3 people that I supervise under me. And my job is essentially to manage all of like the grants that our nonprofit is receiving. And this means, ensuring that employees are, getting their tasks done, but also ensuring that all of the projects within our organization are getting their tasks and objectives done, on top of just, handling a little bit more of the administrative side of, securing grants and applying for grants, and just ensuring that the organization as a whole is being sustainable. So this is definitely not a job that I was expecting to get out of college, and it's definitely challenged me and required that. I think my experience this last couple of months have been to feeling of like, I have big shoes to fill. And I think this is why a lot of the questions that I previously answered have been, be confident in yourself and be confident in the skills that you have. At the end of the day, you're in your interview process, you were hired for a reason, and you were hired because that employer saw something in you, and you were hired because they acknowledged that you would be a good fit for this position. So I think that's extremely important to kind of keep in mind. If I think, especially being your first job, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. Like Dominique was saying, she was working 60-hour weeks, and that's not necessarily uncommon, but I think it's a good reminder to have. This is just my first job. This is a learning experience. There's a learning curve to any first job that you're going to be getting, and just being confident in your own skills and what you bring to the table, and again being open to learning and being open to growth. I think that those has been things that have made these last couple of months easier in terms of adapting to this first experience. And then also echoing what Dominique was saying, you know, at the end of the day, you work in an organization. You have other people that should also, you know, be there to help you or give you guidance, or, you know, tell you more about just the organizational culture, or even just a supervisor that that is really there to train you, onboard you, and make sure that you feel comfortable doing the job that you're doing. So don't be afraid to ask those questions, ask for additional help. If you're feeling overwhelmed, like, be honest and say, I don't have more space in my schedule to add another task, or can we talk about how we can, you know, maybe use time of another employee to help me kind of relieve some of that burden. And I think an additional point that I just wanted to add, so I started working in the middle of the pandemic, which means that I started working from home. And it has definitely been difficult keeping that like work-life balance, especially feeling the additional like pressure of I have big shoes to fill. So I think being very, very intentional about having that work-life separation, especially right now that we're all working from home, is extremely important in not feeling overworked and over, you know, that strict, like, okay, at 5 o'clock, I am going outside and taking a walk, or I am not taking any calls or looking at my emails anytime after 8 p.m. or just having those strict deadlines within yourself, I think are extremely important, because if not, like, just like the work doesn't stop when the business day is over. They'll be receiving calls or emails, and I think just having your own personal boundaries is very important, regardless whether it's your first job environment or not.
Yeah, I think what Sofia was also hitting on here is like grit, or like the idea that you just keep going, even if you undergo like setbacks or see challenges, especially in your first job environment as you're making the transition from student to professional, and even part of your just overall maturation, as Liam was alluding to earlier. But I think the other part of it too is just understanding, like, people are coming from different backgrounds in your first job workspace and environment. And then also what's nice is that, like, among the 4 panelists here, we all have different environments to talk about. So like in my case, consulting is quite fast paced and intense, and very just like, again, involves working with a lot of different people. So understanding that, like, in that kind of first job environment, you got to like pull together the skills that you learned as a student, and just see how they can help you just push through challenges that you might overcome or see in your first job.
I don't know that I have anything to add. That was pretty good. Like, that covers a lot.
I think another point that I wanted to raise that is also important to keep in mind is, like, the workplace is quite different from being a student. So you have to understand, like, on top of, all the teamwork that you might have done as a student, or the camaraderie, like, in the workplace environment, I mean, depending on like where you land or like where you are, just understanding people are coming from different backgrounds, and maybe not everyone has that same kind of mentality as you did, especially as a student. So just understanding that there's another layer of complexity and perhaps even competitiveness, like, once you enter the workplace.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else on the participants have questions to either unmute themselves or type in the chat? Okay, great. So we're gonna kind of probably start wrapping it up with one final question. So what advice would you give students in terms of their skill building, connections, through classroom as well as outside of the classroom experiences? What should they be considering that maybe you didn't consider, or even something that worked for you and that you would encourage others to do the same?
So I guess what one aspect if this is advice to like any undergrad, freshman through senior, trust your gut when you like and when you don't like something. I think I started out IS and I took Chinese and economics like 2 years past when my expiration for Chinese and economics had long gone by. And like my first semester, I said, wow, I really like this class with Sam Chambers on political theory. And then I kept taking classes that I didn't really love because I had this idea that I needed to do these things for, you know, X thing. Until I realized that like the only part of IS I liked was political theory. And then I was a political science major. And then I realized the only part of political science I was really, you know, invested in was political theory. And then I became a philosophy major. You know, and it took 4 years of like fighting myself because I had this preordained picture of what I was and what I ought to be. And I would say like, stop fighting, you know, like trust your gut and what you like. And if something interests you, then, you know, give it 100%. And if you find out you hate it, stop. Like, and that's totally okay. And I think that applies as much to, you know, courses in undergrad as it does to stuff in the work environment, in the workplace. And like when stuff feels good and makes you feel good, go for it and give it everything you have. And if not, evaluate and constantly evaluate. Yeah, that's all I got. So.
I think just building off of that, your first job, because especially if this is geared towards student, your first job is your first job. It's not the entirety of your life or your career. You will definitely overcome challenges and hurdles on the way, but just going off of what Liam said, you know, just keeping that bigger picture in mind to keep recalibrating and assessing along the way, and understanding like that kind of transition, whether it occurs to you like at the undergrad level when you think about your majors and deciding between different classes, will also apply in the post-grad life as you think about what kinds of jobs you'd like and where you go.
Yeah, I think along the same vein, like it's the cliche that I think that people always tell you of like, you know, do the things you love, follow your passion. But I think it's a lesson that it's extremely important to like take to heart. And just, you know, that no matter what you're doing, make sure that it's towards the goal of, you know, something that's going to make you happy at the end of the day. I don't know how to describe this. I guess it's, you know, it's very different if if you're working towards a specific goal, there might be things along the way that are difficult, that are hard to get through, but having that goal at the end of the day, it's like, oh, this is why I'm doing this, really does help you get through it, you know. And you know, whether it's and in the more immediate scale of, oh, I just enjoy doing this, this is my passion, I love serving immigrant communities or whatever it might be, so I'm going to do this opportunity, or whether it might be a doctor, and I think this is a skill and experience that will help me improve that skill of my passion to become a doctor. I think having like a secure goal and just constantly reflecting upon that goal and whether what you're doing aligns with that, not for the sake of achieving the goal, but for the sake of just this goal going to lead to a life that I'm proud of. This goal is going to lead to a life that I will find genuine happiness and enjoyment in. Will I be fulfilled by this type of work that this goal is leading to? And constantly reflecting as to whether the activities that you're doing align to that, I think is extremely important. I guess how, like, similar to what Liam was saying, there's no point in you pursuing something that and you staying in something that is not gonna add to that. So there's nothing wrong with finding yourself in a situation that you're unhappy with, but I think having that ability to say, oh, I'm unhappy in this situation, or this situation leading me to where I want to be, I need to stop. I think it's extremely valuable to be that reflective upon your life. So I would definitely encourage, you know, everybody to have that mindset of constantly be reassessing what you're doing and how it aligns to just your bigger, broader goals.
I don't have too much more to add. I just think if I could just look back at myself 10 years ago, I just really wish I wouldn't have put so much, I have to know exactly what I'm doing right now. It's easy for me to say that. I understand how a lot of you all might feel when you talk about building skills and learning things and making connections. Sometimes you really do just have to go with the flow. You can still go with the flow within your trajectory. You can see where you are now and where you want to be, and it may not always be the most linear way of getting there, and that is absolutely okay. If I think things had worked out the way I wanted it to work out when I had graduated, I wouldn't have learned so many things that I would have learned along the way. And I became a nurse at an older age than a lot of my coworkers, but the people skills that I received from my connections or the different types of work that I did served me well. Working in a crazy West Side ER, and I don't have the same issues that a lot of other people have. I know how to stand up for myself. I know how to work different things out. And again, just having the ability to adapt and be flexible. So when you are thinking about your connections and your what you want to do, just do your best, and it's okay. You will figure it out. You will figure it out completely. Hopkins kids are very driven and go after exactly what they want, but sometimes life doesn't always work out that way. And I want you to keep that in mind as you figure out what it is that you want to do and how you want to do it. Just leave room. Just leave room. If I could just again get this in my head when I was you all's age, like you students, I would have been so much happier. It's all good. You're good. You're doing great. So do your best.
Awesome. I know we're coming up right against the 1 o'clock hour, and so there were 2 more questions that came in the chat. So I do want to give people the option, if you do need to hop off for something else at 1 p.m., whether you're a panelist or a participant, please feel free to pop off. I know Liam at least is going to stay to answer some of these questions, so I'll ask them, and then if people can stay and want to, feel free to stay with us. So the first question is from Rachel, who asked, what are your recommendations for finding leadership positions on campus? And then Mashiad also followed up with another question, saying it's kind of similar and bounces off of what we've been talking about, but how do you tell if something actually is the right fit for you, or if you should kind of move on from that? So those are the 2 outstanding questions.
So I think it might be helpful to go in reverse order of the 2 questions asked, if that's okay. So Masha, that's a really important question. And to be clear, I regret how much time I spent fighting with economics and Chinese, these 2 classes I didn't enjoy, but I don't regret fighting with them. And that's because it's a difficult process figuring out whether or not something's a fit. Or whether or not something's just a challenge. And so the advice I got one time was to ask yourself if this is something you do when you're on vacation. And I found that, when I went on vacation, I couldn't drop these books that I now had interest in. I found myself reading philosophy and the scholarship that I was really, motivated by. And I could do that endlessly. And it made me feel something inside in a way I just never felt with economics. And I think that's a little part of it, at least. It's like, what are you doing that moves you? Now, if it's moving you and it's kicking your butt, then you got to keep going, because, that's the hump you have to get over in order to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And that's a lot of what Sofia was saying too. If you have a goal, go for it, and don't let up. But it's important to kind of keep reevaluating, I think, along the way to that goal, does this move you, or are you blindly following a goal? And I don't know if that's something, anybody can answer for anybody else, but I would also encourage you, to constantly seek advice. I reach out to professors, my mom, to my friends, to whoever I have who might have an opinion and who I know loves me, and will give me the best advice. Their insight is really good. And I guess for the recommendations on leadership positions on campus, I would start with finding so there, and Hope, you probably know better than I do, but there are like student leadership sites now, the Hopkins, like where students have access. I remember going to the student leadership fairs at the beginning of each semester, which give you a really good sense of like what's out there. You know, on your like class Facebook pages, there should be, you know, students, you know, constantly posting stuff. I would lean into professors who are doing things, they're working on things that you like. I mean, the Alexander Hamilton Society is a perfect example of a professor who said, hey, Liam, I have this, you know, friend somewhere else, and he started this chapter. It might be good if you wanted to do it too. And so a lot of it is kind of falling into the places where there's a good chance you will find something, and then leaning on the people in your circles to find those things. And I'm sure Hope also has like a bunch of resources for you for student leadership stuff. So, okay, I'm good.
Yeah, I just also wanted to add that I think the process of finding out whether something is challenging or not a fit is definitely not a one-time thing. You know, it's definitely a process and something that you have to kind of experience through for a bit. And like Liam was saying, it's really not something that anybody else can answer for you except you reflecting upon yourself. But I do want to emphasize that it's not anything that it's going to take 3 times going to a class or 3 times, you know, doing the process, and it takes time for you to truly kind of know, to one, like just get an understanding of what you're doing in this position, and 2, get an understanding of whether it's a right fit for you or if it's just or for you or not. And then in regards to the leadership positions, I think Hopkins has a lot of opportunities for you to like get involved in different offices. Like I think definitely the life design office is a great introduction to any of these places, but target having a conversation or sending an email to any of the departments at Hopkins, whether it's like Liam was saying, whether it's a faculty or whether it's the Center for Social Concern or whether it's the Diversity and Inclusion Office or whether it's the Interfaith Center, or whatever it is that you're interested in. I think there are definitely opportunities for leadership at Hopkins at all levels, whether it's at a council or at a student group. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that leadership isn't just a leadership position. There are many different forms that you can be a leader. Simply being a part of a student group and not being an officer, still having the initiative to start something in the group that places you in a leadership position. So I think also just being flexible in the way that you describe leadership and the way that I can't think of the word, in the way that you present leadership in your resume doesn't have to just be an officer position. I was personally not an officer in any Hopkins groups, but I think I still obtained so many different other leadership skills through different opportunities. So I would just, encourage you for that in specific. Don't necessarily seek the leadership position, but seek ways in which you can be a leader.
I just want to hug you through the computer. So great. So like I said, I just put in the chat, thank you, Liam, for plugging me. Love you for that too. We want to have conversations with you about these types of things. So please feel free to drop into our life design office hours. I put the link that shows all of them where you can see your academic life design educator and what their hours are. I'm obviously the life design educator for student leadership and involvement. So feel free, to drop into my office hours on Mondays or Tuesdays from 12 to 2. But I think, like everyone has said, this is a process, and really lean on your networks and your people. And Andrea and I are happy to be kind of those connectors to some of those people and to help you brainstorm. So thank you, Liam. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you to the participants. We appreciate you sharing your experiences with us.
Thanks.
Awesome. And if you want their emails, they're in the chat. So feel free to pay attention or email us. We can connect you with them as well. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you for staying late.